All right, guys, so we know how to insert elements into the DOM now using multiple methods. Now we're going to look at replacing elements and some of the methods that we can use for that. So we're going to be working with our shopping list UI again, and we're going to be replacing some of the list item elements in this shopping list. And there's, of course, more than one way to do this, so I'm going to show you a couple. Now I'm going to create a couple functions just because we're doing a few things, so I want to be able to run separate functions. So let's create a function and we'll say replace first item. Okay, so I want this function to replace the first item, which right now is apples. So first we want to bring in the item we want to replace, so we'll call this first item and we'll select that from the DOM with query selector and just put in here. You could do li or you could do first child. Either way, it's going to select the first one. And then we want to create our new element. So document.create element. And notice we've been kind of repeating ourselves quite a bit throughout this section, and that's a good thing because it's drilling into your head. How do I select elements? How do I create them, insert them, and so on? Now we want to create a list item to replace it, and I'm just going to add some text content, and you can use text content or inner text, and let's just make that say replaced first. Now to replace, and this again, this is just one way, we're going to use the replace with function or replace with method. So we call that on our first item because that's what we want to replace, and we're going to call replace with and then simply pass in our new element. All right, so let's run this function, save that, and you'll see replaced first. Okay, so that's the first way of doing this, is using replace with. The next one, let's call this function replace second item, and in this function we're going to use outer HTML. Okay, we've used inner HTML quite a bit, and that pertains to the HTML that's in the element. Outer HTML will also include the HTML for that element, so in this case the li tags. So let's get the second item first of all. So second item, and we want to get that, let's say query selector, and to get the second one we could do li and then use nth child and 2. So that'll get the second item, and then on the second item we're going to set the outer HTML and set that, let's say li, and then replaced second li. Okay, so it's similar to setting the inner HTML, except we're also setting the outer tags. If I save that, actually we have to run it, of course. So let's say replace second item, and now you'll see replace second. Now the next one I want to show you is how we can replace all of the items in the list. And there's not a specific method we're going to use for it. What we're going to do is loop through all the LIs with a for each, and then change the outer HTML for each one. And if you want to try this on your own, of course, you can do that as well. So let's call this replace all items. And what we want to do is get all of the list items. So we'll just call this LIs. And then we're going to use query selector all, since we're getting more than one. And we want to get all the li tags. All right. Now, since query selector all returns a node list, we can use a for each on that. So let's say for each, and we pass in our function here, and we're going to pass in, we'll call this item, but I also want to get the index as well. Okay, and then here what we'll do is just set the, let's say item, for each item we're going to set the outer HTML, and let's just set it to replace all. Okay, and then if we run that down here, let's say replace all items, and oh, I forgot the li tags. Okay, so we could do that. We could also use inner HTML, like I could do item dot inner HTML, and in that case I would just do replace all because I'm not replacing the li tags. So you see that does the same thing. If I wanted to choose a specific item and do something else, I could do that. So for instance, let's say if the index is equal to, let's do the second one, so we'll choose the index 1, then let's see, we'll put this, actually I'll just copy that, and then let's say this is the second item, else, then we're going to have replace all. So if I save that, now you'll see second item. Now, why don't you guys go ahead and shorten this up? So this for each right here, we can have an implicit return. We don't need to use curly braces, and we can use a ternary instead of an if. Okay, so if you want to pause the video and try that, you can. But actually, let's go under the for each. But all we have to do is say for each and pass in here our function. We'll say for each item, and we also want to get the index. And then here we'll just say the item dot, we'll use outer HTML. So we want to set that to a condition, okay, or a ternary. So we'll say if the index is equal to 1, then we want this outer HTML to be list item and then second item. Okay, else, then we want this to be a list item and just say replace all, or we'll just say item like that. Okay, so if I comment this one out and save, then we get the same result. It's just a little cleaner and a little shorter. Now, another way that we can replace something is by selecting the parent element and then using a method called replace child. So I'm going to create another function here. Let's call this replace child heading. And what I want to do, if we look at the HTML here, in the header there's an H1 that says shopping list. So I actually want to replace that with an H2. So the way this works is we select the parent, which is the header, we select the item we want to replace, and then we replace it with a new item. So let's go ahead and first of all select header. So that's going to be, let's say, document.query selector, and that has, we'll just select it by the element itself, which is header. And then let's get the H1. So H1, and we'll say header H1. And then let's create a new element. We'll call this variable H2. Say document.create element, create an H2. And let's add an ID, because I believe that has an ID. Or it doesn't. Okay, but we can still add an ID. We'll say .id equals app-title. And then for the content, let's say text content, and I'm just going to keep the same shopping list. Okay, and then all we have to do is on the header, we can do replace child, and we want the H2 to replace the H1. All right, so let's run that function, replace child heading, save that, and now this should be an H2. So if we check it out, there we go, H2, and it has the ID of app title. Okay, so those are some of the ways that we can replace elements. In the next video, I want to show you how we can remove elements.